Sikhs shouldn't, and Sikhs don't only pray for themselves, but that they're asking, but that they also need to ask for blessings for all of humanity, for that you're asking and you're begging and your petition is for the well-being of all of humanity, that you are praying for prosperity for everyone in the global community. And what I am seeing that really brings me a lot of joy and hope is Sarbat Tapala in action, right? And this is happening all around the world. We are seeing so much selfless service, so much care for our global society. It's really brought us together, that we're able to understand that all of humankind is one race. So, the very, very last piece I want to share about Sarbat Tapala is within the Sikh community. I have seen countless, and I can think of at least 100 just within the nation, selfless service, seva projects that have popped out without any national or global organizing. And there's, thousands more global projects that popped out. And a concept that Sikhs believe in of langar, which is, a redistribution of food, or you can call it a free community kitchen. Langar is operating at a whole another level. It's providing meals for hundreds of thousands of people around the globe who have been stranded without the means for food. And here within the US, it means that the Sikh community is stepping up and working with school districts to fill in the gaps where meals aren't being provided when spring break happens or when Easter break happens, things like that. It means that, we're seeing projects of grocery deliveries, tutoring projects, homework help, things of that nature, creating resources so community members know where to turn to for help, providing PPE and hygiene supplies to all kinds of frontline workers, whether it's taxi drivers, hospital workers, truck drivers, everyone that is keeping our society still functioning. So seeing global seva, seeing global selfless service, and Sarbat Tapala, right, all of us caring for all of humankind, for global society, in action gives me hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Aziz. Imam Musa.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and blessings of God Almighty descend upon all of you. Esteemed colleagues and fellow faith leaders, all of our esteemed viewers, my name is Hussam Musa. I'm the Imam of the Islamic Center of Greater Cincinnati, and it's an honor to be amongst all of you and with you and together as we are all together in this. Definitely trying to find, it gives me warmth and solidarity and strength during these times to see everyone as we are now and stand shoulder to shoulder next to one another. Going to or diving into the topic of this afternoon's session, trying to find hope in times of uncertainty. As an imam, I try to look into God's message to humanity in the Holy Quran. And I found and I find many verses, and some of which I'd like to share. It's very inspiring and gives me a lot of hope. When God says, قل يا عبادي الذين أسرفوا على أنفسهم لا تقنطوا من رحمة الله. Say, O my servants who have wronged themselves, do not lose hope or despair in the mercy and compassion of God, Allah. And I also found another beautiful verse that God Almighty says, وهو الذي ينزل الغيث من بعد ما قنطوا وينشر رحمته وهو الولي الحميد. And he is the one who has rain fall when they have lost complete hope. And he has his compassion and mercy spread all about. And he is the one to go to for guidance and help. And of course, many practical stories. We have the story of Prophet Job, which relates very closely to physical ailment. And in the Holy Quran, God says, وَأَيُّوبَ إِذْ نَادَى رَبَّهُ. And when Job called upon his Lord, أَنِّي مَسَّنِيَ الضُّرُّ وَأَنْتَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. That hardship has afflicted me, and you are the most merciful. God says, فَاسْتَجَبْنَا لَهُ. We immediately responded to his call and prayer. وَآتَيْنَاهُ أَهْلَهُ وَمِثْلَهُمْ مَعَهُمْ. And we gave him his family, and we doubled them in number. رَحْمَةً مِّنْ عِنْدِنَا. A mercy from us. وَذِكْرَى لِلْعَابِدِينَ. And a reminder for the worshipers. Job lost his family. Job lost his health. Yet he didn't lose hope in God. Our hope is not in people. Our hope is in the creator of people, the instiller of hope in people, the one who uses people to inspire one another. So Job called upon God when all the means, and by human calculations, he and his family were, some of them perished and some were about to perish, but God gave him complete recovery. And I'd like to also share quickly the story of Moses, peace and blessings be upon him and all prophets and messengers of God. When he and his believing followers, they stood there, the seas in front of them, and Pharaoh and his tyrant armies behind them. And God says in the Holy Quran, quoting and encapsulating that scene, فَلَمَّا تَرَاءَى الْجَمْعَانِ قَالَ أَصْحَابُ مُوسَى إِنَّا لَمُدْرَكُونَ. And when the two parties saw each other, and in another verse during the time of sunrise, they said, the people of Moses, that we definitely, certainly are going to perish. قَالَ كَلَّا. Moses said, no. Inna ma'iya rabbi sayahdeen. Certainly I have my Lord with me, and he will guide me. And we know the story from there. God intervened, the sea parted, and Moses and the believers were saved. And Pharaoh and his army perished. These are just moments of hope. Whether you are facing a sickness like Prophet Job, whether we have lost loved ones like the family of Prophet Job, or whether we are facing an enemy, seen or unseen, like Moses saw and faced his enemy along with his people. God is always there, and we always have hope in God Almighty. And we must never lose hope in God. Prophet Jacob, telling his children when they went to seek and look for Joseph in Egypt. And these are at least a decade, if not decades later, because Joseph was taken from his father and he was a young boy. And we know later he became the minister of finance in Egypt. And we have in the Holy Quran God telling us about Job, Jacob saying to his children, يَا بَنِيَّ اذْهَبُوا فَتَحَسَّسُوا مِنْ يُوسُفَ وَأَخِيهِ وَلَا تَيْأَسُوا مِنْ رَوْحِ اللَّهِ. Oh, my children, go and seek or search for Joseph and his brother, and do not despair or lose hope in God. So it's very important for us to always keep hope in God. And I will conclude with a prophetic saying of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, Jesus, Moses, and all prophets of God, that he said, ما من داء إلا خلق الله له دواء عرفه من عرفه وجهله من جهله. He said that there isn't an ailment except that God has created a cure for it. Some may find it, some may not. So we have hope in finding it. We have hope in the scientists and researchers. We have hope in standing together. And lastly, I see also hope being inspiring by my fellow brothers and sisters and human beings. We have our gymnasium at the Islamic Center of Greater Cincinnati filled with boxes, and these boxes are all filled with non-perishable foods. And we have professionals and mothers and fathers and children that are using the proper social distancing and coming standing next to each other to fill these boxes and distribute them as I was walking into my office. We have mothers and sisters that have sewed face masks, over 1,000, and distributed them over the last couple of weeks to all of the local hospitals. So I see hope, and I believe in the one that gives hope, and I pray that God helps us find a cure and vaccination for this virus, and I hope this brings out the best in us as I see it now. Thank you, and may God's peace and blessings be upon you.
Thank you, Imam. We now turn to Bishop Thomas.
Thank you, James. Let me begin by thanking my distinguished fellow contributors for your meaningful input regarding the topic we are addressing today, finding hope in a time of uncertainty. Please know that I count it a single honor to have been invited to share and contribute my rambling thoughts to such a timely and important topic. As I was pondering what might I share in this conversation today, my mind raced to the words of an old jazz tune of a number of years ago entitled, "What a Difference a Day Makes." I will not quote the lyrics of Dinah Washington's song, but I do lift this title because a few weeks ago, those words became so real to us. Just think, there was a day before our current reality of wearing masks, disrupted in-person worship experiences, jumping in our cars and going where we wanted to go when we wanted to go, dining in at our favorite restaurants, taking in a movie, sharing the sidewalk with other persons, celebrating in person in a non-restrictive way the life of a loved one who has passed away, and many other things that we were able to do one day not too long ago. And then life and doing life for all of us changed in a day because of the invader called COVID-19. You and I know so well and have firsthand experience with COVID-19, what COVID-19 has, that comes with it uncertainties. The uncertainties of when, where, how, and other questions one can ask in regards to or as a result of this pandemic. We may not know where to place the blame. We may not know how, when, we may not know when is the right time to move closer to beginning to reclaim the sense of the familiar. We don't know because of all the uncertainties that are part of the COVID-19 package. But we who are people of faith come to this moment keeping hope alive. Fainting though that hope may be, we yet keep hope alive. We can and are willing to do all in our power to see the hope in the moment. It is not easy when you see the rising number of cases of death. It is not easy when you hear a person without a job or income for more than a month and a half. It is not easy when you see families having to say goodbye to loved ones virtually. It is not easy when grandparents and grandchildren can't love on each other. And it's not easy when you have a leader who's spending more time blaming than encouraging, inspiring, consoling, and giving leadership. However, we must keep hope alive and move through this knowing that in spite of and in the midst of the uncertainties, we can be certain of some things. We are certain this is passing. How long, we don't know, but we know it is passing. We are certain we have the help of a power greater than ourselves and the virus on our side. We are certain that the one we call God has not brought us this far to leave us now. Therefore, it is with these certainties that we can appreciate the media, politicians, and others for their grim and other forecasts and predictions. But we don't stop listening until we get a word from our sponsor. We get this word through his word. As our sponsor tells us in Psalms 46:1, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in time of trouble. If my reading of the moment is correct, this is a time of trouble, and our sponsor is at his best in times when we are facing troubles. He is with us in the midst of them. Not only does our sponsor speak from the Bible, but he also inspires others to speak on his behalf. One such person was Martin Luther, who wrote these words to give us certainty in the midst of the uncertainty. A mighty fortress is our God, a boat with never failing. Our helper, he amidst the flood of mortal ills prevailing. For still our ancient foe does seek to work us woe. His craft and power are great, and armed with cruel hate, on earth is not his equal. And our sponsors speak through the voices in our community. Many a times when faced with personal and communal challenges and uncertainty, voices from the community would rise and speak words of assurances. These are words from old men and women who, without seminary training, just a relationship and a connection with our sponsor, they would simply say, not only do I have a feeling that everything is going to be all right, but they would boldly declare in the midst of the situation, it's all right already. So then you see, it is because of the word from our sponsor that we can hope, that we can cope and have hope in the midst of the uncertainties. We can hold it together in the midst of the uncertainties because we know how to be in touch with our sponsor. The Bible I read invites us to look to the hills from where our help comes. We know our sponsor is everywhere, but when we need a word for such a time as this, we look to the hills because we believe it to be the place where he gets his mail. That's a black church little thing. Our request is to help us in this and every time of need. No matter the crisis or the situation, the faith we have is a faith that sustains us, encourages us, empowers us, upholds us, and guides us through the maze of the uncertainties. It is always good to hear from the politicians, business leaders, scientists, media personalities, and others. But we in the faith community know that we have not heard, that all has not been heard on the matter until we hear a word from our sponsor, who stands with us in the midst of this pandemic. And while standing with us is assuring us that we may not have asked for this, but we are indeed built for it. In times like these, we find hope in the words and actions of our sponsor, whom we call God. Not only do we find hope in him, but he is our hope, even in times of uncertainty, because he is standing with us, he is standing by us and with us, strengthening us for the journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop. And finally, Rabbi Gary Zola.
Well, thank you, Dr. Buchanan. Good afternoon to one and all. I cannot say it's been anything but it's been so special, really, for all of us to hear these beautiful, inspiring, and inspiriting words from all of those who've preceded me today. I want to begin by sharing something with you. In the year 1902, an American rabbi named J. Leonard Levy published a small booklet entitled Children's Service for Use in Religious Schools. This booklet contained 4 creative worship services, which the rabbi had composed for the children in his congregation's Sunday school at Congregation Rodef Sholom in Pittsburgh. One particular responsive reading seemed so relevant to the theme of today's special webinar. Let's take a look together at that selection. The rabbi or superintendent writes, "At all times, and in every place, we should worship God by serving God's children, our fellow men of all creeds, colors, and conditions. For one God created us all, and one God have we all. And then, as you see, the children were to rejoin, "Thou shalt be a blessing. Thou shalt always do thy best. Thou shalt be loyal to Israel's faith. Thou shalt hope on, hope ever." It really should come as no surprise to see that Rabbi Levi placed these remarkable words into the mouths of the youngsters in his religious school. For in fact, he was introducing them to an essential teaching in Judaism's spiritual heritage, and truth be told, as we've heard this afternoon, to the preeminent message of every faith and every spiritual tradition. You see, we testify to our faith in the reality of a transcendent and universal spirit when we, as Rabbi Levi taught, do all we can to serve our fellow beings at all times and in every place. The formula for that service in trying times remains unchanged over the generations, as the rabbi spelled it out. Be a blessing, always do your best, be loyal to your heritage, and of course, hope on, hope forever. Sooner or later, every human being confronts trouble, adversity, and uncertainty. And the difficult, disorienting, and dystopian circumstances that have overtaken all of us, our whole nation, and indeed the entire world, constitute an example of this very lesson writ large. Yet hope, friends, is the most potent countermeasure we humans have in our emotional arsenal, because hope and faith are analogs. Hope is the power that fuels our determination to perfect the world and to repudiate those who would have us acquiesce to the inevitability of human suffering and the invincibility of injustice. In her diary, Anne Frank wrote, "Human greatness does not lie in wealth or power, but in character and goodness." More than 2,500 years ago, the prophet Zechariah urged his people to fortify themselves in their faith. In doing so, he referred to the people as Asirei Hatikva. This means prisoners of hope. In this time of unhemmed adversity, unhemmed uncertainty, let each of us resolve to become prisoners of hope. For as Rabbi Levi taught his young disciples so many years ago, be a blessing, always do your best, be loyal to your faith, and above all, hope on, hope forever.
Thank you, Rabbi Zola. So we've had a number of questions come in. Thanks to all the panel for the reflections. A number of questions. I'm going to try to combine a couple of them into a question for the whole audience. One is really was directed to Bishop Thomas, but I think it relates to everybody, is that how do we deal with the people of color who have struggled, who may have an enduring hope during this pandemic because God has brought them so many struggles in the past? And then tied to that, how are we in our various communities dealing with those who are suffering, who don't have access to the internet, who aren't as blessed as we are to have this technology at their fingertips so that we can at least stay in touch with each other? So I'll open this question up relative to those who are underserved, those minority populations, whether they be of color or whether they just simply not have access to the technology. And Bishop Thomas, maybe you'd like to start us with this one.
Yeah, well, I think that I think one of the things that this moment has unfortunately given us is that it has given us a front seat in the reality of the inequities that exist in almost every arena of the human community. The thing that I think can be hopeful for us is how do we respond to this moment? I was in some conference calls and conversations looking at the numbers of persons affected and persons of color, the persons without these young people who are having to do school at home and who do not have the means by which to do them, and how unfortunate that is. But that's the reality that we have. And but I think that the hope in the moment is that we're seeing there are some real conversations taking place, that genuine conversations taking place. The second thing is that we must not allow this to be just a moment of conversation. It must be a moment of genuine action. And I think the way in which we do this is that each one of us make ourselves a committee of one, making sure that we are reaching out and reaching back for those who may be on the other side of this, and making sure, being advocates in any arena that we find ourselves, speaking up, if it's the health community, whatever it is, and making sure that this moment is not lost on us, as graphic as it is. But I think that the reality is that it is what it is. But this may be the moment. This may be the moment unlike any other moment. And if we fail at this moment, it would be a shame. But I think this is our best hour. This is our best hour to really get at those things.
Do others have comments of how we're reaching out to our communities who don't have access? Gary Zola.
Well, I just wanted to sort of dovetail on the final comments that Bishop made, and that is that we've heard a great deal about how the world is going to be permanently different. It's going to be changed. And what the Bishop's comments remind me is that there's sort of a patina to that suggestion, that is, we're going to be worse off. We're never going to be the same. It is possible for the world to change radically, but to be changed for the better. And I think we need to keep this in mind. In other words, I think if I understood the Bishop, I think I did, that the tomorrow, this moment that we have, can help us to rise up, to pick up on what Assis was saying from her prayer, to rise up and to change the world and move it in a better direction. That can happen.
Others on this question? So Assis, please.
So a lot of our community, especially the recent immigrants, really are on the front lines of this in their trucking, especially over the road long haul positions. And a lot of them have been communicating and trying to stay positive through Punjabi Radio USA and really communicating through WhatsApp. So I think that's been really helpful for many members of the community who either are isolated at home or isolated in their, very small truck compartment space, that they're still able to find some community and some form of communication. And a lot of that has been happening over WhatsApp. So if anyone's got a cell phone, they're able to communicate through that, which has been helpful.
And thank you.
Good.
Let me end with this one, and just a quick through. Can you give one living example from our community that you've seen recently that has given you cause for hope for a better future? I'd like each one of you, if you have just one living example of something that makes you think maybe the world will be a world of abundance rather than a world of scarcity, whether that we move into something hopeful. Father Graham.
Sure. Whenever I go into Kroger and see what the people are doing there, stocking shelves and making sure that the folks who will come flooding in at 7 a.m. Can get what they want as much as they possibly can. I mean, that who'd have thought that grocery store clerks and people stocking shelves and so on would come forth as heroes from this? I mean, I find that incredibly inspiring.
Yeah, thank you. Who else wants to share one?
I will say that I'll take this moment to be one of those signs that we are communicating, and really when you listen to what we've said, there's something that there's some similarities in what we're saying, and hope is spelled the same way. You can define it any way you want, but this is a hopeful moment that we are having conversations, and that there are persons who are joining us, and then that there'll be other weeks of this, and then just the Festival of Faith and all that we seek to do together is a shining example for me.
Thank you. Who else on this? Imam?
I see, like everyone else, has a lot of reflections, and one of the reflections I'm able to take away from this very difficult and unusual experience is to be grateful and happy wherever we are, in whatever career we have, in whatever stage in life we are. And I'll share with you just briefly, many of us who were complaining about not having enough time with family now seem to have an abundance of time with family. In society in general, many people may feel the grass is greener on the other side. And in this particular example, I don't mean it in any negative way, but it's just a reflection that in our society we see, and I pray and I love our healthcare professionals and our physicians, but we see everyone was wishing to be a doctor maybe a month ago, many people. And today people are in a very difficult position if they are physicians or healthcare professionals. And it just gives me a reflection, as much as my prayers every single day in all my lectures to pray. I pray for all of our frontline healthcare professionals, physicians and nurses and garbage people that are coming and going out of their way to help us. These are all frontline folks that my prayers goes out to them. But just, today I get calls from friends that are physicians, and they're saying, I'm scared. I'm afraid. I woke up today with an itch in my throat, and I'm not sure if I have COVID-19 or not. My whole family is worried about me. And I'm just reflecting, a month or so ago, everyone's dream, at least in many of our communities, especially immigrant communities, their dream is to have their son or daughter become a physician. And there's nothing wrong with that. But just within a month or two, we see that it's one of the scariest things to do or be. that gave me some reflection. Just be grateful for whatever it is that you are doing. Be grateful in whichever stage of life, place in your journey of life you are. Just be grateful. I think that's one of the takeaways for me. Don't think the grass is greener anywhere. It's your grass right now. Enjoy it.
Yeah. Assis?
Sure. Seeing us prioritize care and love for the global community, for all of humanity, gives me a lot of hope and inspiration. Seeing us trying to use our voices to care for the migrant workers that were left stranded in India when the restrictions and the curfew went into place, seeing us trying to use our voices for what's happening in the Bureau of Prisons, for what's happening in ICE detentions, seeing us really care and prioritize those that we might usually turn a blind eye to has been really inspirational. And I hope that, we see countless more selfless service projects pop up without any organizing throughout the world.
And Rabbi Zola?
Well, I'm going to follow in Father Graham's example. I think that all of the comments that were made are absolutely wonderful examples, and I just am going to pick the one that is in my front of my mind, and that is the beautiful story, the report about how in a nursing home, which we now know, and we're hearing about how that is one aspect of our population, of our community all around the world. The elderly who are living together, who in general, even before this, often have lonely and separate existences. How this current situation has made that even more grave, more alone, more difficult to bear. And some people went to a nursing home. They built a glass protrusion onto a wall or a door so that they could bring the elderly to that window, that glass box, and then they could talk to one another. And that went on in that particular center all day, and different people came to see. I think that could be a metaphor for what you're asking, Dr. Buchanan. In other words, this is a time when we're sitting alone in our homes and in our offices, but we're together. But there are people who are, as the Imam said, even in a worse situation. And if we can bring them to that metaphoric glass window and put our hands and touch them and communicate, then we will end up on the other side of this, not with a life changed for the worse, but maybe in some respects, even just that much better.
I think one of the themes that runs through all those comments is something that we learned from one of the Jesuit spiritual practices called the Examen. And that is the appreciation of gratitude and living your life in a grateful way. And I think one of the signs for me is the students that I interact with, how they've come to the realization of all of these things they took for granted and were not grateful for, they will be grateful for when they have them again. And if we can live lives of gratitude, we will live better lives. Let me leave you by again thanking our panelists for their thoughtful and wise reflections. Please, to the audience, hold these in your hearts as you go through the week. And let me thank the audience for being here with us today, and blessings on you for whatever you're going through. I also want to thank Chip Haird, who is the director of Equation, for his leadership in this, and Lisa Frankel and Ryan Craig from HUC-JIR for handling the Zoom logistics for today. Let us keep in our prayers all those who are suffering from this illness, or who have friends or family who are suffering, those people who put their lives on the line every day to provide health care, grocery services, trash collection, and food distribution to those who desperately need it, and others who continue to work in the public in these uncertain times. Thank you again for taking time to join us today. Please be safe and be kind to others. And please join us again next week, same time, same virtual space, when we will have 4 new panelists who will reflect upon the theme of finding peace in a time of anxiety. Go with peace. Goodbye.
Bye.